Gamecube gets an EU launch date. EA sues over Einstein. And Aussies censor GTA. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time 40, 30, and 20 years to find out what was making headlines in the video game and home computer industries. Today we travel back 20 years to March of 2002. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mads. Welcome back, Mads.
Well, thank you for having me once again.
No problem. Thank you for making the time. So, let's get right into the important part of the show, the one that everybody comes for, banter. What have you been up to?
So I've been up to modern gaming, mate. Actually, I've been playing retro-inspired games, but let's not stick with that right now. I've got my hands on a Steam Deck. I finally got my Steam Deck.
Wow, really?
So I've been playing around with that. That is a beautiful little piece of kit. I know I said that just last week when I was talking about the A500 Mini, which is also a beautiful piece of kit, but the Steam Deck is really something special, actually. And I've been playing Milkmaid of the Milky Way. You know that?
No, but it sounds right up my alley.
Retro-inspired 2D point-and-click game made by one Norwegian guy from Oslo, I think. Mattis Folkestad, I think, was his name. Yeah. And because I'm a Dane, I understand Norwegian, so I actually even opted to play it in the original language. So I played it in Norwegian, and it's all in rhyme, so everything's written in rhyme. Such a beautiful little story and lovingly created, and he did everything, the graphics, the music, everything. So if you do enjoy your point-and-clicks, check out Milkmaid of the Milky Way.
I will put a link.
And playing it on the deck, the Steam Deck was brilliant. I chose to play it on the Steam Deck because I wanted to experience how playing a mouse-controlled game would work on that platform, and that actually works really well.
Okay, now I've obviously heard about it, but is it now the mouse controlled through a thumbstick, or is it a touchscreen?
So you've got like three options. You can control it with a thumbstick, but I don't like doing that with a mouse. There are two touchpads on either side of the screen. I use the right touchpad to control the mouse, which is just like a touchpad on your laptop computer. And you can click the touchpad as well for left click, or you can use one of your bumper buttons. Isn't that what they're called? I think I used actually the R2 button for click sometimes as well when I need to drag something from the inventory. Or you can just there's a touchscreen as well, so you can use that. But if a game hasn't been created for touchscreen, often it doesn't work because then it probably needs much more precise clicking than what you'll do with your fingers. So I just used the touchpads I think I pretty much just used my right hand, really. I used the touchpad with the thumb on the right hand side, and used either clicking on that touchpad or clicking on the R2 button with my right hand as well. So, and it works really, really well.
Oh, wow. That actually sounds really, really cool. Have you done any experimentation with emulation on it yet?
I have. I of course installed EmuDeck, which is a beautiful little package that uses Emulation Station on the Steam Deck. Steam Deck is an open platform. It's just a Linux platform, really, and you can pressing the Steam button, I think it is, you can select Exit to Desktop, and you go into a full desktop, really, like a GNOME desktop on your Linux machine. And there I entered in a few commands, and well, hey presto, I had the EmuDeck running. And EmuDeck injects itself into the nice interface as well, so I don't need to go to the desktop. I can just, like I would choose a game, I can choose EmuDeck. That'll spin up Emulation Station, if you know that. It's like front end, right? And behind the scenes is RetroArch and other emulators running. And I had a little go at playing some CD32 games, actually. And cool. I haven't been spending a lot of time with that, but that's my plan for the weekend, checking out how well it does as an emulation.
Very
device.
Cool. Oh,
so
dude.
Apparently it's really, really good. You can play GameCube, and even up to Switch games if you want. But GameCube is really well supported, for example. So
Damn.
And PS2
Okay.
and all that.
Oh, the toys. How much did it set you back?
Far too much. It was quite expensive. Something along the lines of 650 euros, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And last week I was complaining about the fact that the Amiga Mini was going to cost me way more than I would be able to afford.
Yes.
Now I know that, Steam Deck is way out. I'm going to have to stick with my Retro Boy here.
So I signed up for Steam Deck when they announced it, well, a while ago, right? And I didn't really need it right now, but then the chance was here to actually pick it up, so I went for it anyway. Just closed my eyes and used my MasterCard. So
I hear you. I'm kind of I am jelly. I'm just going to say it. I'm jealous. But that actually sounds awesome. And I'm glad that it actually works as well as it does. I've heard from other people that the mouse emulation through the touchpad is really, really good if it's been implemented properly.
Yes.
And they're still adapting a lot of games to work with it. So
some games, when you play them, you can control the mouse with both touchpads, and that actually becomes quite natural. You just alternate between the thumbs, and even sometimes your two thumbs help each other, just moving the cursor around, and it works really well when you press it on the right. Actually, funny, when you press on the right-hand side, there will be a left click, and if you press on the touchpad on the left-hand side, there will be a right click, and that feels really natural. But even for games that haven't been adapted to the Steam Deck, like Milkmaid of the Milky Way, just using the right trackpad there works really well as well, I think. And you can tweak all kinds of settings with the sensitivity and everything.
So when you say that, I mean, I'm trying to imagine. So you're actually moving with just one of the thumbs, but the other thumb is for the second mouse button. Unless
it's been adapted to work well on the Steam Deck, then you can move it with both. And sometimes if they are... How large are they? Like 3 times 3 centimeters. Those little trackpads there. So sometimes it'll feel natural when you're holding the controller to just, if you want to move all the way from the bottom to the top, move a little up with your right hand, then a little with your left hand. It just takes over. So actually that works really well as well.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we were just talking about last time with the Amiga mouse how you sometimes had to lift it up in the old original Amiga and then keep going. So this would be basically a modern equivalent of that same tactic.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, now I got to give it a go at some point. I got to find somebody who's spent the money, who lives close enough to us to be able to do that. Oh well.
Yeah, it's a nice package. The only problem, there's one little thing that annoys me a bit. If you play something that's taxing, the fan is quite noisy.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, it's got to have a fan in it, given the power behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well. Okay, now, banter is done. We need to do a little bit of promo. Remember, everybody, that you can follow us on the socials, blah, 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 blah. And all the links are in the show notes. Everything we talk about, links in the show notes. Link to the Milkmaid of the Milky Way will also be in the show notes. Now, the first segment of our show, as always, is our wonderful segment, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, in which the co-host must spend 7 minutes playing one of the games that was reviewed in a magazine dated March 2002 that they have never played before. And remember, when we're talking about March 2002, we're always talking about the cover dates of magazines or newspapers. Of course, the news happened at some point before that. It's a framing device. Don't send me letters. So, Mads, are you ready to engage with 7 Minutes in Heaven with Command and Conquer Renegade?
I am indeed.
Excellent. Then let the games begin.
Stay loose. Keep your eyes open.
Under heavy fire. Request immediate reinforcements. This is Recon 1. We're taking fire. We're taking fire.
Recon 1, we're sending a commando.
Welcome back, Mads, from your 7 Minutes in Heaven. So, for the uninitiated, based off of your 7 minutes with the game, how would you describe Command and Conquer Renegade?
So it's tactical mission-based first-person shooter with a lot of story to tell as well in cutscenes between missions. So set in the Command and Conquer universe that a lot of us probably are very familiar with the conflict between GDI and the Brotherhood of Nod. And you are a commando, the commando unit that was, I think, put into the games in Red Alert, I think. And you need to be a cog in the big machine of war and try to resolve this conflict, I guess. You're fighting on the GDI side of things, at least from the beginning you are. So.
Yeah. And so from the point of view of a FPS game, how would you say that it holds up?
See, I was actually surprised at how well it plays. It looks like a game from 2002. Maybe even looks a tiny bit worse than you'd expect from a game from 2002, but it's serviceable, definitely. And it shares a lot of the looks with the Command and Conquer games, which just endears it to me, of course, as a fan of that series. Yeah, how does it look? It feels good. It's as a guy who plays modern and have played a lot of FPSs over the years, one thing that's a bit weird is that there's no simulation of your movement at all when you're walking around. So you're not taking any steps. You're just sliding. You're on roller skates, just sliding around the environment. But apart from that, it felt really good. Actually, it was fast and it was action packed. So yeah, I liked it.
Cool. And
very varied arsenal, actually. Considering that I only played it for 7.5 minutes, I think I got to play with a gun, an assault rifle, a sniper rifle, a bazooka, and some C4, something along those lines.
And you also got to jump in a tank.
And I got to jump in a tank and shoot stuff with that as well.
Yeah. And I guess that's probably the best use of the license at this point. Of the game is the fact that you have a game built around an RTS, so you've got tanks and all the other mobility devices, and to be able to allow you to use those just kind of expands the world from your standard FPS.
Yeah, and a fun little detail actually is that like in the Command and Conquer games, when you hover a unit, it'll add this little green box around it, and you can see its health just like in that game. So when you shoot stuff, you can see the health go down and okay, the next one. Just it's very lovingly done, and it's very true to its source material, I think.
Yeah, and I played the game back in the day. I wasn't a huge Command and Conquer fan. In fact, I basically spent like maybe 20 minutes playing Command and Conquer, and I like the idea that it really felt like there was this whole other conflict going on. I wasn't the lone soldier who was going to change the world like in a Duke Nukem or something. And instead it felt like there really was this giant other conflict going on, and I was just one cog in the machine.
Yeah.
You know, and
yeah, definitely
that was just unique. And so I played this for quite a while back in the day. Now, it was not well received, or it was okay received, but it didn't get a lot of praise from the magazines at the time.
Okay.
They were not overly excited about it, and I think it had to do with the fact that, like you said, even for the time, it looked okay, but it didn't look great.
No.
And I think that hurt it a little bit.
But I think what should have been a positive for it is the whole use of the vehicles. I mean, already in the first campaign mission, you were driving a tank around and having fun with that. And that was a new thing back then. I mean, Halo was just released, well, actually the same month, isn't it? That was on the list for this month as well. And that's one of the first games I remember you be able to use vehicles like that.
And that's the thing that that wasn't something we knew about, or, I mean, it had happened in some other games. There were games that allowed you to use some vehicles or jump into a turret and shoot stuff. Yeah. No One Lives Forever came out the year before and had some of those options built in. But I think that it didn't feel as natural as it does in this environment, because this is an environment where you have this all-out war happening. It was like No One Lives Forever. There was a snowmobile, and so you jumped on the snowmobile, but you were all alone in in this alpine thing and you'd get attacked. Or another game that had a vehicle option was Terminator Future Shock. And that's years before. But there, you jumped on the back of a truck and you were using the gun that was mounted to the back of the truck to shoot Terminators attacking you, but you had no direct control over the vehicle. So there were games like that in the FPS genre, but it didn't feel as natural as it did here. And for the really old school people, you could argue Midwinter did this way before.
Yes, it did.
This is the first time that it's being done with more than 3 frames a second.
Oh yeah. And with a game that's actually fun to play.
Yeah. So while some of the magazines, I'm actually just, I'll link to this in the show notes. On Moby Games, they always have, excerpts from reviews. A lot of the publications at the time gave it relatively high scores.
Okay.
And so GamePro magazine and the German GameStar magazine gave it relatively high scores. But where you get the mediocre scores are the online reviewers, which were already gaining more and more speed. GameSpot and IGN, that's when the reviews drop into the 70s.
Okay.
And I think it had to do with the fact that they weren't looking at the early review copies. These are probably reviews that are happening closer to the actual release date or with actual release copies. And they're seeing it in light of things like Halo already coming out and so forth. Yeah. And I guess they're probably also seeing it from the standpoint of, will a Command and Conquer fan get into this? Probably not. If they're not also an FPS player, if they're just an RTS player, less interested. And will the FPS fans appreciate all the nods to the RTS if they're not familiar with the RTS?
Probably not, but there must be a lot of people like me who love their FPS and RTS games.
You would think so, but apparently not enough to justify the making of the sequel.
Nope. Well, this took them a long time to get out, so it must have been a bit of a pain as well.
Yeah, it was also caught in development hell. So, Okay, in the final analysis, would you recommend that somebody pick this game up?
I would actually. I think it looked really interesting, and if I find the time, I would love to play a bit more of it myself. Maybe it's one of those games I should try to fire up on the Steam Deck and see how that works with those controls.
That would be interesting, especially since it's definitely not a game that's been specifically adapted for it.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Give us your report when you get back next week. Okay, Mads. Now that we've closed out the 7 Minutes of Heaven, and remember, everybody, if you actually want to see us commenting on Mads' play, his 7 minutes of playing, you can see that as a patron supporter of the show. For just $1 a month, you will get access to the video versions of our 7 Minutes in Heaven sequences, as well as early access to our interviews. And we have 3 really cool ones up there right now. Link to all that in the show notes. Now, before we can turn on the time machine, we have one more stop, and that is to check in with our good friend Ethan for the Department of Corrections.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan.
Hey.
So, let's find out what I got wrong in February of 2002. But, first we have other business. What's the other business?
We have to enter the Shark Tank for Mads Jump the Shark when he made those those museum displays, wherever he did them. But yes, now I know all about your man-eater madness over in museums scaring children in Europe. Good job, Mads. We support you. I mean, I love those kind of displays when I was a kid. I mean, I just love museums, so I'm down for anything cool and interactive like that. More funding to museums.
I can only agree. And
because you're in the Department of Corrections.
And museums are, supposed to be correcting people's misconceptions about what happened.
Sure. That's the thematic link here.
Okay.
But yes, the Department of
I think we should move on.
Corrections.
Yes.
We've got all the right tools for all the right business. And Carl, you're about to get a taste of everything.
Okay, that's I don't even know where to start with that. What do you got for me?
Okay, first up, the PSX Greatest Hits line was not right around the time that they did the PS2 launch. They already had it from back in March of 1997.
Okay. So a year and a half before is that a year and a half before the Japanese launch of the PS2?
No, it launched in 2000, so.
Oh, you're right.
Further
Jesus.
ahead.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, that's March 97. It's a few years into the PSX's life, but not that far. Yeah.
Because you needed some time to hit 1 million, especially in those days. But once the PS2 launched, you could get to 1 million pretty quick if you were one of the top titles.
True. Do you know if that was the first time that you had a greatest hits line for a console?
I'm almost certain that's not true. I think the SNES had one, but I can't say definitively right out.
Yeah, I don't remember the Super Nintendo having it. But then again, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense because the production cost of cartridges still would have been the same, relatively speaking. It's only really possible once you have disc-based media. I mean, in the home computer arena, it was a given since the early 80s. But that it would have been, or mid 80s, I should say. But for a console, PSX may have been the first. Maybe Saturn had it before. I don't think Sega CD did. But yeah, that would be a little interesting little factoid to look up. But oh well. Okay. Sorry.
Keep an eye out as you go through 1992. But we're in February 2002, so we must move on. Next up, Howard Lincoln was never the CEO of NOA, and he wasn't promoted just before he left either.
Did I say right before he left?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was vice chairman. Well, I think you were confusing what I had told you before, where he was promoted to vice chairman in 1994. Ahead of Arakawa, but that was, several years, Arakawa left.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was, 94, that would have been right around and that was, I think, part of the discussion about him being promoted or being given more power relative to Arakawa as a result of Sega's performance in the market.
Yamauchi lambasted Arakawa in the press. For that, he did not hold back, and that is a status of him as a man. But also on the topic of the succession at Nintendo of America, the person who succeeded Arakawa was Tatsumi Kimishima, who after Iwata's death took over as the president of NCL. So he was the interim president, and it was always clear that he was going to be the interim guy. But yeah, he was the person heading NOA until Reggie Fils-Aimé came on, not Fils-Aimé, which is what you said.
Yeah. What can I say? That's already a little bit. It's almost on the border of me not knowing stuff.
What do you think this Department of Corrections is here for, Carl?
I know, and I appreciate it, and I will continue to mispronounce that name for quite a while longer, I'm sure.
And of course, now at NOA we have Bowser running the whole thing, so we're all doomed.
Yeah, exactly.
And last bit of business, Paul Neurath. You said you were talking about Surtec, and you said that Paul Neurath worked for Surtec, but he never worked for Surtec. What he did with Surtec was entirely an independent submission, because Surtec did, aside from the wizardry stuff, didn't do anything in-house.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I what I meant to say was he worked with them in the sense that he publishes games through them. But yeah, probably should.
And that game, which you could not remember the name of, was Deep Space Operation Copernicus.
True. And I looked it up right after we finished recording, and it's actually on the cover graphic I did for my interview with Paul Neurath. So it's right there. It's easy.
Staring you in the face this whole time.
Exactly. And if you guys want to see it, you can go check it out on the YouTube post of the episode. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Link in the show notes.
Weird, interesting game, and the especially weird thing is that it was the first collaboration between Neurath and Ned Lerner, who they would later combine their companies to form Blue Sky, then Looking Glass. But Ned, he stopped working on it at some point, and then Paul finished it up and submitted it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and we talked about that in the interview, I believe, too. Couldn't remember all the details of it. Done too many interviews at this point, but yeah.
There's many things in the backlog, and if you want Carl to release more things from his backlog, he needs some more server space for the podcast. So why don't you support him on
Patreon?
Yeah.
Link in the show notes. Yes. Well, remember all the interviews show up there 3 months early, or most of them at least. So go check that out. We got some good ones, and I've got so many already recorded. It's scary. So they will continue to pop up there as the schedule allows.
Speaking of scary, this is the end of the Department of Corrections.
For this month.
Of course. Excellent. We will be back for March of 1981, 1991, and 2001.
You want to add a 2 to the end of all of those.
Oh, yes, that is right. I have forgotten the concept of time, for in the Department of Corrections, we have no window.
There you go. Okay, Ethan, as always, thank you for your service.
Okay, bye.
So, Carl, who was before Reggie? Come on.
And I'm going to kill the name again. Tatsumi Kimishima. And I'm sure I killed that. I am sure I killed it.
You did quite well. I actually only asked that question to hear you try to pronounce that name. But that was fairly good. Fairly good, mate.
Says the guy who also doesn't know how it's pronounced properly.
I have got no idea.
No idea. Excellent. Cool. So we can both pat ourselves on the back that we think I said it right.
Yes.
I can dig that. I can totally dig that. Okay. Now that all of the formalities are out of the way, let's turn on the time machine and head back to March of 2002.
I think this guy's the one.
2002. The demographics are
Welcome to March of 2002. Mads, what's our first story?
The ATEI show disappoints.
The ever-dwindling market for amusement arcade games in Europe was evident at the latest ATEI show at Earl's Court in London. More and more spaces being eaten up by gambling games or those that incorporate video technology into gambling devices. The industry does try to counter with ever more elaborate gimmicks such as Konami's Perfect Pool, a virtual pool table game that features a motion-controlled pool cue and cue ball, Namco's Turret Tower, a game that puts the player in a small booth containing a 360-degree swiveling chair and a monitor and has them shooting down enemies to defend a tower, and Tsurugi, a game controlled using a samurai sword hit motion tracking controller. None of these are really going to set the world on fire, and most look no better graphically than what is already being seen on Xbox or PS2.
So what does ATEI stand for?
Oh, this is a show that's been going since the 70s. It's the, crap. Now you've asked me a question. I do not know the abbreviation.
Put you on the spot. Sorry.
You put me on the spot. 1 second. The ATEI Arcade Show, London. What does it stand for? Amusement Trades Exhibition International.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that's been going on for forever in England.
So some of those new arcade games, they do sound like fun gimmicks, but not like something you really like to play. I mean, at least for me, I'm an old school arcade gamer. Give me a 2D game on a screen and some arcade controls, or sticking some buttons. That'll be good. But it does sound like fun playing on a virtual pool table, or grabbing a samurai sword hilt and then slashing some samurais.
Yeah, the only problem is here that they're trying to use motion control systems that are very similar to what the Wii will use in a few years. The only problem is that you don't have the distance that you have with them.
True.
And they don't quite have the technology down yet. So the few reviews that I found of this, and also I found a few videos of this, I'll put links to this stuff in the show notes. Basically, they're uncontrollable.
Okay.
The controls are constantly wiggling back and forth. Did you ever use a light pen on something like the Commodore 64?
Yeah, I tried that, yeah.
Yeah. Remember how the cursor would constantly jump around all over the place?
Yeah.
That is essentially what is happening.
Yeah.
The Tsurugi game, and again, I'm probably killing the pronunciation. There's video of it, and it's like apparently very, very easy to kill everything. Just because, and it's probably because they loosened the control enough, they built in enough safety because of that the inaccurate controllers that almost becomes too.
Yeah, but these kind of games, they're novelties more than they're real arcade games. It's not something you'd practice and get better at. It's something that kids would pop in, far too many coins actually, because this is a late arcade game, so they'll be expensive just to have a go, isn't it?
Exactly. And this is obviously the problem that the industry has had now for several years. And we've been talking about it in our 30-year jumps as well as the 20-year jumps. Remember, Street Fighter II reinvigorates a very, very weak arcade market.
Yeah.
Where games like, 4-player games were attracting. We just talked last week in the 30-year jump about the 6-player X-Men game. They're already having to rely on these gimmicky setups to attract people away from the 16-bit consoles. And the one big hit is the one-on-one fighter because you want to have that competition. So you go to the arcade to find competitors. But, games that are just, side-scrolling beat-em-ups, unless it's doing something that you can't do at home, becomes a very difficult sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
speaking of that X-Men game, 6-player X-Men game with the dual monitors. So Kit, one of our listeners from Retro Asylum, sent me a video that he recorded in an arcade he'd been in not too long ago. So now I've finally seen that behemoth machine. It's huge.
It's beautiful, ain't it?
Yeah, it is. It's something to behold.
Oh yeah, no. We, like I said, we had one in the arcade that I worked in the 90s. And yeah, it was beautiful. It was absolutely gorgeous. Playing on that thing was great, but unfortunately, it doesn't really come to life until you have 6 players around it.
True.
And
I can imagine that.
I only got to do that a couple times with the full roster of everybody playing. And it does completely change. I mean, it's chaos. You can't tell what the hell is going on. And you're probably going to get a little bit disheartened by that. But at the same time, it's also awesome. What I can recommend is load it up in MAME, set all the controls to be controlled by the same joystick and 2 buttons.
Yeah.
So you're controlling all 6 characters simultaneously.
Okay.
It's chaos, but it's beautiful. It's just fun. Same thing goes for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games. Set it up so one controller is controlling all 4 of them simultaneously.
Yeah.
And you'll probably only be focusing on 1 or 2 of them, and the other ones are just kind of stuck behind a garbage can kicking for no reason. But it's so much fun to play it.
Okay.
Just as a recommendation.
Never tried that.
Things to do with MG.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, the next piece of news. We're going mobile now because Castlevania White Knight Nocturne is a mobile game, isn't it?
No, actually. Well, it is a mobile in that sense. Castlevania will be getting a second helping on the GBA with White Knight Nocturne.
Yes.
Which looks to be taking a page, or several chapters actually, from the PSX classic Symphony of the Night.
So mobile as in handheld. That's what I meant.
Well, yes, in this case. Now, I was completely shocked when I read the name of this game, and I was like, what the hell are they talking about? This was in Play Magazine. And this is actually going to become Harmony of Dissonance.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know where this name came from. I can find no references to it anywhere.
No, I've never heard it before.
Yeah, me neither. And I'm a huge fan of Harmony of Dissonance.
Okay.
That game, Harmony of Dissonance and the sequel, and I'm blanking on the name of that. That was for me like the true successors to Symphony of the Night. I almost put them on par with Symphony as far as game is concerned.
It's embarrassing, but I mean, we all do have some gaming black spots, and Castlevania is one of mine. I've only ever played the very first game in the Castlevania series. Yeah, the NES game. I know that, but apart from that, never played any Castlevania games.
There's the Castlevania games, and there's going to be Castlevania diehards who are going to lynch me for saying this. Castlevania games are not all the same. There's obviously huge differences, especially Castlevania 3, where you have different characters that you play and stuff. But they really change when they get to Symphony of the Night on the PSX.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to play anything else, play Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, that's what most people say. Symphony of the Night, or maybe the PC Engine CD title, Rondo of Blood.
Rondo of Blood looks very nice, looks very modern, but it is still at its core a traditional Castlevania game.
Okay.
Symphony of the Night adds RPG elements, lots of them.
Okay.
And it adds this whole thing where, you're traveling around the castle and you get to a point where you can't keep going. But then you find an item later on, and when you equip it, suddenly you have new abilities that allow you to keep going at that point you couldn't go at before. That's why they call it a Metroidvania at that point.
Yeah.
So it has that unlocking abilities to get to a new section mechanic from Metroid, but also adds a ton of RPG elements. You get a ton of different types of weapons, and you're slowly upgrading the system. And then when you go back through an old level and now you're super powered, it's like the guys who used to be a problem. You're just wiping through them with no issues. And it really has an unbelievably cool flow, a tremendous soundtrack. That beautiful gothic sounding orchestral sound is just gorgeous. 3 different endings. I mean, it's beautiful. And all the mechanics of that game, that Metroidvania thing, gets expanded on in these 2 GBA sequels. So the first GBA game is very much a traditional Castlevania, whereas this basically takes the art style and the Metroidvania concepts from Symphony of the Night and just continues that evolution.
Okay.
Yeah. So I recommend those.
Yeah. So maybe that's the next thing I should try to emulate on the deck. Let's see.
Oh yeah, Symphony of the Night. That would really test also the audio capabilities of the system.
Okay.
And it's also a fun game because it's just the way the PSX had to display sprites, because the original PlayStation has no sprite in it.
No
sprite hardware. So it's all flat polygons with textures.
Yeah.
But it creates an unbelievably smooth animation system. It's very, very nice. Yeah.
Cool. So speaking of emulation, ScumVM goes mobile.
The point-and-click adventure interpreter ScumVM that has been letting many modern gamers play classic point-and-click adventures on the PCs has been ported to the Pocket PC platform. The increasing power of portable devices as well as the openness of their platforms is making them fertile ground for retro gaming.
So ScumVM is, I guess, not really emulation, but it's just a reimplementation of the interpreters that actually supports a lot more than just Scum these days.
This is true. And this is just one example, though. There have also been ports of emulators onto things like Pocket PC.
Yeah.
And it's an increasingly interesting environment because we are still a few years out from the iPhone. We've talked on the show in the 20-year jumps about Java gaming picking up on handhelds. Last month we talked about Street Fighter 2 getting ported to Java cell phones. But this idea of games like Day of the Tentacle being ported to or being playable on this portable device, this was a huge deal. I remember reading about this way back in the day and being like, okay, so you have this little mini computer device in your pocket, and now you can play point-and-click adventure games, and considering that it was using a touchscreen, that just seemed like the perfect application, for a portable touchscreen type device.
Definitely.
So it's interesting to see, and this is also being reported on in a paper publication in the Spanish magazine Micromania. Now, granted, the Spaniards love their point-and-click adventure games. I mean, any Spanish listeners out there, you guys know this is true. And at this point, every month, they still dedicate 2 to 4 pages of the magazine just to point-and-click adventures.
As they should.
Yes, but it's 2002. There's virtually no games coming out. Granted, there's the Cryo games, but less said about those, the better.
Microids would still be publishing brilliant games around this time.
Would still be publishing. I mean,
Siberia is from around this time, I guess.
Yeah, Siberia and Runaway is also from around this time.
Runaway is quite good, actually.
Yeah, and we're about to get a GBA port of Broken Sword 1. So there are still point-and-click adventure games coming out. They're just not really a powerful thing, but the fact that they're dedicating this much room each month in a publication to it, it really speaks volumes about the dedication of this fan base.
So let's drop the mobile scene and get into some console. Gamecube gets a European launch date.
After long being silent on the matter, Nintendo did a live webcast on January 28th announcing that the Gamecube would launch in Europe on May 3rd. This puts the launch a full 7 weeks after Xbox's European launch. Nintendo has promised to ship 1 million units to the territory, and that recommended retail price of €249 or £150 will likely be kept except for in the UK, where some retailers have already announced a retail price of £170. Yeah. So.
Yeah, a bit late to the party when you compare it with the launch of the PS2, of course, but almost at the same time as the Xbox.
Yeah, but also way later than everybody else. Remember, these two consoles were out for the Christmas business in the U.S., which is probably pissing off a lot of retailers who were hoping to be able to stock it for Christmas.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's a big deal that they're going to have an entire million units ready for the territory.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting this
much production. PS5 had 1 million units at all.
How the times have changed. You'd think these numbers would go up with history. But
I'm sure they've sold many millions already, but it just seems like they're like hen's teeth. You can't get a hold of them anywhere.
No. Gotta love it. It's scary. But yeah, so we're finally going to get the GameCube in Europe. The Xbox is coming to Europe, so Europe finally is going to be a next-gen territory as well.
Yeah. And speaking of the Xbox gets aggressive price in Japan.
In a bid to conquer the Japanese market, Microsoft has announced that the Xbox will be selling for a mere 34,800 yen, about €30 less than the US price, and a whopping €179 less than the European retail price. This puts Xbox at just €42 more than the PS2 in Japan. Whether or not price will be enough to woo Japanese gamers will be the deciding question.
As far as I know, it won't.
No, it will not.
That's because of other reasons, I guess. One, that the PS2 was so huge, also in Japan, but worldwide. And two, maybe this is just a rumor. Maybe Ethan can correct us on this one. But I seem to recall reading about the controllers being not so well received in Japan because they're so huge.
Well,
the Japanese didn't like that.
No, and we talked about this. The Duke controller was never the launch controller in Japan.
Okay.
Already way before this, when it was first introduced for show, they already had the smaller controller ready to go for Japan.
I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah. So, and we talked about this on the show because I didn't know that either. I thought it was also introduced later. It just gets released as a secondary controller in North America and Europe later.
Okay.
Or maybe the
Makes sense.
European one launches with the smaller controller. That I'd have to check. But it does come out later in the U.S. The Duke controller is not the launch controller in Japan.
Okay.
And there's the famous picture of Bill Gates holding up an Xbox controller and a hamburger, and it's not the Duke controller.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this idea that they can woo them with the price, and of course they also have some games lined up from Japanese developers, but they don't have the big ones, and there's a certain amount of the Japanese are not going to buy a foreign console. going on here that we can't ignore either. But as Yamauchi already said, Final Fantasy is an extremely important thing for the video game market in Japan, and there will not be a Final Fantasy on the Xbox, at least not early on.
No. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of the last of the big consoles here, Sony launches a printer for the PS2.
Ever feel the need to print out a screenshot of your game to show your friends how cool it looked when you took that turn in Gran Turismo?
Nope.
Well, a ditto. Well, Sony has you covered with the Tapis printer, T-A-P-I-S, a $160 inkjet printer that compatible games will let you print stuff on, like screenshots or stats.
So only compatible games. So you can buy a $160 printer that you can only use for a select few games that will support this.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Basically.
I'm thinking they didn't sell a lot of these.
I couldn't find any numbers, but yeah, this is not going to be a big success.
No. Let's skip to the next piece of news.
Yeah, it's just dumb. But I needed to include because, yeah.
Yeah. So, another dumb thing. GTA 3 gets censored in Australia.
The world is abuzz with Rockstar's GTA 3. Every magazine this month has some kind of coverage of the phenomenon. Australian game mag PC Power Play reports that despite an initial rejection of the country's classification board, the game has garnered an MA15 plus rating that will let it go on sale. The censored version will not allow players to engage with prostitutes nor harm them. The game would get reclassified in its censored form in 2019 to an R18.
Okay. I recall playing GTA 3 on the PC. It was for me. Brilliant game. Loved the racing in there as well. Loved the feel of the cars. But I don't really remember it for any prostitutes in the GTA 3.
Really? No, GTA 3 was the one where you could pick up a prostitute in the car, drive to a secluded area. So you had to find a place where there were no street lights. I can't remember exactly, I never knew exactly what the algorithm was looking for, but if you went between two buildings or into a shadowy place, the lights of the car would go out, the car would start shaking back and forth, you'd hear
really
going on, and that would restore your health.
Okay, I've never tried that in GTA 3, I think.
It would cost you like $50 or something, restore your health, and the prostitute would get out. Now, the problem is that GTA tracked that the characters had money on them. So if you killed a bunch of people on the street, they would drop money that you could pick up.
Yep.
Then people figured out that if you got out of the car and killed the prostitute, she would drop the money you gave her plus the money she had before.
Oh, nice.
So you could get your money back.
Classy move. Yeah, okay.
Well, create a system and gamers will find a way to exploit it. Obviously, this was the hot coffee of its day. This was the thing that this idea really, really sparked a controversy. People were talking about this in a big way when this game came out.
Okay.
And that mechanic survives into the PC version. It's still in the PC version.
Yeah.
Obviously not in Australia. The German version went even further with the censorship. In order to get it on the German market, you couldn't do, there was no blood. So if you killed people, there was no blood. There were no headshots.
Okay.
You could not and anybody you killed did not drop money. There was no money drops when you killed people.
Okay.
So you couldn't get rewarded for killing someone.
Okay. I definitely haven't played the German version.
Yeah, me neither. Because what's the point? But yeah, so but the Australian version, that is kind of wonderful little exception in, killing people. They had no problem with that, but you engage with a prostitute. My goodness.
Okay. Oh, well. So next piece of news is IDOS sees sales drop.
Sorry. British mega publisher, the house that Lara built, Eidos, has seen a 44% drop in second quarter revenues due to poor performance of their latest updates to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Commandos. They're hoping that their next-gen ports of these games will fare better, or maybe their next Tomb Raider game will save them. Yeah, and so Eidos at this point really is the house that Lara built.
Yes.
There's no other major franchise, and they've been dropping a lot of games over the last couple years, but nothing really has caught on. Did you ever play Commandos?
Nope. I remember seeing them and thinking I should get into it because it looks like something that would be right up my alley, but I never played any of them, I think.
The first Commandos is really, really cool. I mean, there's shades of cannon fodder in it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a little bit more tactical, with each unit having its own special maneuvers and stuff, using pre-rendered backgrounds and everything. It's really, really pretty game. Really, really cool, deep tactics once you get into it. It's already a very hard game, the first one. The second one, the difficulty is so insane that it's just punishing.
Yeah.
It's unplayably punishing. And that's why it's basically fallen flat. And the fact that Eidos, it's an English company, they're still very much in the vein of computer first, console second. And so they're launching all their major titles first on PC and then porting them to the consoles.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily where the industry and the money is. And Eidos is going to continue limping along for a while, but their big hope is that the next Lara is going to do really well. And the next Lara is, well, it's an infamously bad Lara that's coming. So, but we'll cover that when we.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Eidos. So Tomb Raider comes out of Core, of course. And at some point, Eidos buys that.
Eidos is the publisher.
Is the publisher? Okay, but
yeah.
didn't
now
I thought Core self-published the first one?
No, they didn't self-publish.
Okay,
No.
Okay.
That's why it comes out in that weird semi-pyramid looking box, which was standard Eidos box at the time.
Okay.
No. It's always an Eidos production.
Yeah.
Yeah, published game. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't remember when Eidos buys them. When does Core Design get purchased by Eidos?
Eidos, at around this time, they would have gotten their hands on Hitman as well, which was a huge franchise for them.
Hitman was very popular, but I don't think it ever sold in those quantities.
Okay.
Hitman was one of those games that everybody was talking about, but I don't think that many people actually purchased.
I did back in the day. I remember buying the very first one. Was that called it's called Codename 47, isn't it? Hitman Codename 47.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. So, okay, Core Design was acquired by Eidos Interactive in 1996.
Okay.
Yeah. And so 1996, and then I believe same year is Tomb Raider is released.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So Eidos isn't doing too well, but somebody else is doing a lot worse actually, because Majestic shut down.
Yeah, EA's revolutionary multi-platform conspiracy theory game will be shutting down by mid-2002. With only 15,000 paid subscribers to the game that spans PC, phone, and fax, to say nothing of the changed post-9/11 atmosphere around privacy and conspiracies, the game will not be tenable.
I want to know how this game used a fax.
Well, we talked about Majestic months and months ago. I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. This was EA's attempt to do this immersive game.
Yeah.
Where you would you installed this program. It looked like an instant messenger program those were very popular at the time, like ICQ.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you'd have this, and you would also get emails, and you would get links to videos. And if you had a fax or a phone, you'd get messages on your cell phone or messages on your regular phone.
So probably
they might even send a fax. Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to be this immersive thing as if the conspiracy was real, and they would use all these different media to immerse you in it and to give you the clues that you could then, try to piece together and move forward in the story.
Sounds like fun. I like the idea of that, but I can see how that can be hard to monetize, really.
Hard to monetize because you need the subscription, and then also you have the problem that, what if you jump into the story at a point X?
Yeah, exactly.
Does everybody who subscribes start with story 1? Well, what do you do with spoilers and people on websites talking about it?
Yeah.
And then, you get to post 9/11 and suddenly the whole thing just, stops being a fun fantasy, So yeah, Majestic, wonderful little experiment. Could have been something really, really cool. But yeah, it's going nowhere and it's going to get shut down.
Okay. Playnet Finals 4 Chapter 11.
Speaking about online games, Playnet, owners of developer Cornered Rat Studios, love that name, makers of World War II Online, have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Playnet CEO Jim Mesteler said that the strategic plan for the company will ensure that the game continues to be supported.
And how long was that supported for then?
You can still play it on Steam today.
Oh, okay.
So World War II Online is still ongoing.
Yeah.
It still gets updates. I don't think they've really done too much to the graphic engine in 20 years. But as a big, persistent world, it's still out there.
Okay.
And so
Impressive.
World War II is still going. But yeah, I mean, it didn't really set the world on fire. The original idea of the commercial, you buy the box in the store and then pay the monthly fee and stuff, that model just did not work out for the publisher.
Okay.
But this is Chapter 11, which means that they're restructuring, not that they're liquidating.
No. Okay.
And so they're going to survive this, but we're going to see a lot of this. And this is something that it's hard for me to capture with individual headlines, but going through all the magazines the last 12 months in this 20-year jump, the number of MMOs being announced, the number of MMOs launching, the number of big online projects that are coming online, there's a lot that's going to die.
Okay.
And this is sort of like the canary in the coal mine. This is the World War II Online we talked about when it first launched like a year and a half ago. And now the chips are starting to draw. Everything is starting to fall apart a little bit for these games because there are only so many people who can subscribe and play simultaneously.
Yeah.
People only have so much time. The big games are getting bigger. The smaller games are going to be falling by the wayside. EA had to give up EA.com. And getting an MMO right is much more difficult than a lot of people thought.
Yeah, I guess the market, even though it's huge for MMOs, then one gamer will probably play one MMO because it's a game that you invest so much time in. So you'd have to choose one, and then that sales channel is away from all the other games now.
Exactly. And also remember, the model has changed. So I talked about this with Gordon Walton, who is the old school MMO guy.
Yeah.
Link in the show notes to that interview, that the entire idea of you create a box game, you ship it, maybe you have a patch or two, but that's it, doesn't work with the MMO. You now have to have this constant update, constant upgrade of the system, creation of new content, managing the community. There's an infrastructure and the cost of that infrastructure that needs to go into the financials of these games.
Yeah, of course.
And that is just a logistical challenge, getting these things off the ground, plus the idea that you have this massive investment in the development of the software, which you're not immediately going to recoup the first 6 weeks on the retail shelf. And there's a lot of companies that just aren't really willing to take that risk, of saying, well, we're going to spend a lot of money on the software. we're not going to make it back in 6 weeks. Instead, we're going to continue to spend even more money, and we'll make the money back over 5 years.
Yeah.
And that just requires, a change in your outlook. And given the fact that so few games, MMOs, have really been successful up to this point, it's hard to convince investors that is a good idea.
Yeah. You'll need to have a big bag of money yourself or some investors that really believe in your product.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So moving into PC territory here, BioWare settles with Interplay.
RPG mega developer BioWare has settled their suit with Interplay. As we reported on here over the last few months, Interplay had allegedly not been paying BioWare royalties and was in serious financial trouble. BioWare is still busy working on Neverwinter Nights, and thanks to the settlement, will now be able to publish the game through Infogrames, subject to Interplay's pre-existing licenses. BioWare is also working on Knights of the Old Republic for LucasArts.
So explain to me here what the lawsuit was about. Who's using what?
Okay, so BioWare had developed Baldur's Gate and the games using the Baldur's Gate engine for Interplay's RPG, a sub-license, or not sub-license, but sub-label Black Isle. And Interplay has been in a lot of trouble for a long time. They had the failed Star Trek Secret of Vulcan Fury game and a bunch of other titles that they invested a lot of money in. They had also been using a lot of licenses like the D&D license, like the Star Trek license, that were not necessarily producing the financial results that they needed them to be producing to make back the money that they needed. The only thing that was still producing cash flow for Interplay was Baldur's Gate.
And they haven't been paying royalties on that.
They hadn't been paying the royalties because they needed it for other development. They also tried to get in on consoles. This is where we get Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and the Fallout Brotherhood of Steel game and a few others. And those games, with the exception, of course, of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and Dark Alliance 2, are not necessarily all that successful. So they're trying to shift into console. They're doing it too little, too late. And Interplay and BioWare is basically taking their toys and going elsewhere.
Yeah.
So this next generation engine, the Neverwinter Nights engine, which moves everything to 3D and stuff, is not going to be there. Knights of the Old Republic was already going to go to LucasArts as it was. So, it's without them, Interplay it has its days numbered because it has really nothing else to fall back on. And still going to release some things, but no, it's not really going in.
So I guess that's why Brian Fargo leaves Interplay.
Interplay co-founder Brian Fargo has left the company. We have reported on the company's issues over the last few months, but apparently the loss of Neverwinter Nights was the final straw and new management was called for. Yeah. So Brian is not going to stay away from the industry for long, and he will come back. He'll do his crowdfunded Wasteland 2 and try to bring back some other properties. He'll also do a reboot of Bard's Tale, which many people deride as terrible. I say it is glorious. The action remake of Bard's Tale, yes, it's not the original game. Has nothing really to do with the original game, but it is one of the most entertaining fantasy action games ever made.
I don't think I've ever seen or heard about that.
What? Oh, dude, you've got to play it. Have you ever played Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance or Dungeon Siege?
Dungeon Siege I finished, and Black Alliance I've only just tried.
Okay. Very, very similar in game mechanics to Dungeon Siege. In the sense that, you have your character, you're moving around from an almost bird's eye point of view and so forth, and you're playing this bard who can conjure up allies through magical song. But the real kicker, and the gameplay is not the deepest and most strategic in the world, but the fun comes from the fact that the bard is this drunken, womanizing, ne'er-do-well, and he's constantly trading barbs with the narrator.
Yeah, okay.
And the whole game is just these two basically going at each other. And then there's these little interludes where these little goblins come out and sing funny little drinking songs and stuff.
Sounds good.
It's amazing. It is one of my favorite games of that generation. I've played through it like 3 times. I've had it on iOS as well. It doesn't really play all that well on iOS, but it's just so funny. It has such a wonderful sense of humor, and I highly recommend it.
And it's just called Bard's Tale.
The Bard's Tale, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, more games to look up. I need some more time.
It's coming down the pipeline. It's coming down the pipeline. We may be able to do a 7 minutes to heaven on it.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so PC sales dipped 11% in the US.
2001 was a brutal year for the PC industry. While the worldwide sales for PCs dipped 4%, the US market took an 11% tumble. An economic downturn led many companies to put off upgrading existing equipment, and even though consumer demand did rise a bit towards the end of the year, the after effects of the PC buying boom of the .com era has led to a saturation in the market. Dell was the only major manufacturer to see a market gain, rising 18%, while all others saw double-digit declines. Dell has now replaced Compaq as the biggest seller by a large margin, with both HP and Compaq's combined sales not matching those of Dell. Gateway is also in decline in 4th place ahead of IBM.
So this is pure speculation on my part, but 2001, 2002, that's about the time of the Pentium 4, I'd say. Are we seeing a decline in PC sales now because from this point forward and to this very day, the whole effect of CPUs and RAM and disk getting like double the speed every year is really, really fading now. It's not moving that quickly anymore. So is that why people hang on to their old PCs for a couple more years, or is that too early?
It's I wouldn't say that that's the problem.
Okay.
Because the average user, if they want to upgrade, and the upgrades are coming in the form of video cards. The 3D accelerator is really the driver of gaming. Yeah. But most people are not opening up the box to switch that out.
No, but in the 80s, you'd buy a new computer quite often because they would be double the speed the next year, or maybe even more. And also in the early 90s, the speed would just skyrocket. But when you get into the 2000s and we're in the territory of the Pentium Force, for example, the speed with which the computers get faster is a lot slower, a lot lower.
Yes, but you also have to remember the people that you're talking about who care about those things are such a small percentage of the market that they don't swing anything.
Yeah, it could be.
The hardcore PC player who cares about that is not relevant. They're a rounding error.
Yeah, it could be.
And instead, what we're dealing with here is the fact that everybody and their grandmother bought a machine to go online during the .com boom of 98, 99, 2000. They all have a machine now that does everything they want, plays the latest version of Eidos's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yes.
Or they can play the biggest selling game in the United States at this time, which is Deer Hunter.
Okay. Yeah.
And have you ever played Deer Hunter?
No. I think I've played the arcade game if it's the same.
No. The Deer Hunter at this point doesn't have 3D models in it. It is quite literally just you scrolling back and forth around a circular 2D image, and occasionally there's a 2D scanned image and I'm oversimplifying for any Deer Hunter fans out there. Mm-hmm. If you're a Deer Hunter fan out there, I'm so sorry. There's a scanned image of a deer and you shoot it. Okay. It
sounds like fun.
It's pathetically bad, but it is by far. Quake and stuff, this is outselling actual real games by multiples of 10. So when they're talking about selling PCs here, they're talking about people sitting at home. They just bought a machine 2 years ago. They're not going to upgrade this thing until they have a high-speed connection at home and they need to connect it and they don't have a network jack. Or if they already have a network jack, that's it. We're not upgrading this thing until it stops working.
No, true.
And what had been driving sales was the fact that the PC penetration in the households was still very, very small. But the boom in the access to the internet has now made them almost ubiquitous, and now there's almost no home that doesn't have one anymore. And so that is where they're hitting this. And this is the first dip in sales in PC since 1985.
Yep.
And when we get to 85, we're going to see there will be a dip because we will have reached this saturation point where everybody who wanted one had one. But the worldwide sales back in 85 dropped 2%, and the U.S. sales dropped 22% in 85.
Okay.
It was that big of a drop. That's when you lose all the other competitors and you're just left with the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But yeah, so this has to do with the mass market. The hardcore gamers are still going, and Dell has been pushing the idea of the hardcore gaming system. All the magazines in the States, the big ones like Computer Gaming World and stuff, have multi-page Dell ads at the end of them. You know, with all these machines that are going for $2,500–3,000, which at that time, I mean, there's still inflation. That's massively expensive machines, but that's the market Dell is shooting for, and that's the market you were talking about. Those people are still upgrading. They want more. They may not need a faster processor necessarily, but they definitely need more RAM and a better video card.
Yes, that was the new race, the video card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary.
Okay, now for some really, really sad news, because the era of PC games in big cardboard boxes is over.
2 years after the IDSA, Interactive Digital Software Association, recommended the move to DVD cases for PC software sales, EA has made the plunge in the U.S. with Medal of Honor Allied Assault. The packaging is already a standard in Europe, with Vivendi Universal the only major holdout sticking to cardboard boxes.
Yeah, that just makes me sad all over.
Yeah,
I
know.
got a copy of Medal of Honor Allied Assault right here in the PC CD-ROM release from 2002 in a DVD case, and it just looks like any other game I could have bought the past 20 years. So boring.
Yeah, I know. I still love looking at my cupboard and my shelves filled. You know, when you see the old Sierra boxes, that standard size, that standard height, you know, and then you see, you know, your standard old EA, the really thin record looking boxes, or what used to be the Microprose boxes, which were nice and hard. I mean, it just, yeah, it's sad. They didn't have to be giant, but they still had to have, you know, some personality to them.
So the boxes themselves were one thing, but it was the stuff inside the boxes, mate. I mean,
yeah.
As soon as they moved to DVD cases, the beautiful big manuals became small leaflets that was inserted into the DVD case instead. And after a short while, that disappeared as well. Maybe you'd be lucky if there was just a one-page. Here are the keyboard combinations that you need to deal with it. And today there's a PDF on the DVD. Look at that if you want. So yeah, I mean, I remember when games had maps and code wheels, code books to do the to prevent piracy, the copy protection, of course, and they had charm as well, and yeah, they were all these feelies as they called them back in the old days,
Infocom days, yeah,
exactly, and I love that, and I'd love to get that back.
There is something about that experience of opening up the box and just discovering what's inside. I mean, I still remember first time I opened up Wings, the CinemaWare game.
Yeah.
Now, this didn't apply to the European release, but the U.S. release included this entire book. It was like 100 pages long book on the history of World War I flight. Nothing to do with the game, but it was just a book to set the mood, to get you going, you know?
Yeah.
And that's
my copy of Midwinter, you talked about that earlier. It's got this huge book inside, and the first half of it, maybe 80 pages, is all about global warming and how a new ice age could come about. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean,
just background knowledge, and you don't need it to play the game at all. It's really good.
Or Elite had a novelette explaining the background story. I mean, there's so many of these great examples. Now, granted, there's also a billion games that had Jack All. Probably my old-time favorite, the VGA remake of Leisure Suit Larry 1.
Yeah? What'd you get there?
You got 3 pamphlets. Like when you go to a tourist place and at the hotel they'll have 1,000 pamphlets for tourist traps.
Yeah.
There's 3 pamphlets in there for tourist traps near lost wages. And they're all just full of really, really bad sexual innuendo jokes. But they're the copy protection.
Okay.
And it's amazing.
Never seen that.
Oh, check them out online. They are just hilarious. They feel and look like real pamphlets with photos and everything. Like there's one where it's, go to the Dude Ranch, and it's, you be a cowboy, and there's another one that's go visit the Great Tetons. It's like these mountains and stuff. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible, but it sets the mood perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well. Yes.
The end of an era.
Let's move to something else. So the next piece of news is that EA sues over Einstein likeness.
Electronic Arts has filed a preemptive suit against Hebrew University over their request for licensing fees due to the use of Albert Einstein's likeness in the Command & Conquer Red Alert games. Hebrew University was bequeathed the rights to the physicist's likeness upon his death and have been licensing it, and also has a panel that determines how and who to license it to. EA hopes to get a declaratory judgment from a court that would bar any suit from being filed by claiming that Einstein is a historical character, making his inclusion in their alternate history narrative fair use.
Okay, so they say even though they have taken his likeness, they are not using him as Einstein, or well, at least it's not in the real history. It's in their own alternative universe.
Well, and this is the weird thing. Now, Hebrew University has been charging for the use of his likeness in ads and movies and so forth, and nobody has really seemed to challenge them. I couldn't find a good history of the cases here, but I did find a couple of motions and decisions by the court in this case. There's a link to that in the show notes. So they were basically generating income from licensing his likeness. And EA's argument is he's a historical figure. We're dealing with a narrative that is based on history. We're doing an alternate version of history. So you can't simply say, oh, you can't talk about history because you own the likeness of a certain character in history. If I want to do a documentary about Einstein, I can use Einstein's face because I'm informing people. It falls under what's known in the legal terms as fair use. And that's their argument. And what's going to end up happening in this is that some kind of out-of-court agreement was reached.
Okay.
But because of normally that means they paid something, but there's no record of it. In this case, though, EA actually asked the judge to get awarded legal fees that they incurred. So Hebrew University would have to pay the legal fees that EA has. Now, they are not successful in collecting those attorneys.
Okay.
But the fact that they asked for them means that EA didn't pay them any.
Okay. So maybe that was a win
this
for them
did
anyway.
not turn out to their liking. And I think the reason why they backed off is that they realized EA was going to win. And if they got this one win, everybody else would be able to rely on that win to fight this in the future.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's my reading of the record as it's so. But it was interesting. I didn't know that Hebrew University owned the right to Einstein's image and that there was some kind of licensing. I just would have expected it to be completely fair use and everybody's using it as they will, but apparently at that time that was not the case. The copyright would have expired by now, but still interesting.
Yeah. So moving on, C64 disk images go legit.
Gremlin Graphics and Jeff Minter's Llamasoft have made their 8-bit back catalogs freely available online. A welcome move, but not universally adopted, as Rare has been sending out cease and desist letters.
And Jeff Minter just turned 70 this month, I think.
Yeah.
So happy birthday, Jeff.
Yes, definitely. So many good games.
Oh yeah. No, but that's great news, of course, back in those days. But most of us probably had all those games dumped somewhere anyway from the originals that we have on our shelves, of course.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, and it's also a topic that's been coming up a lot in the magazines about, how do they cover this? So some of the English magazines actually have whole sections dedicated to retro. Some magazines, will occasionally link to a website that, is talking about retro games or emulation. And the fact that these guys have made their back catalog available as emulatable images is quite cool. But at the same time, it's interesting to see a company like Rare that hasn't, made any direct money off of any of its old Spectrum back titles in decades or a decade and a half, is putting out these cease and desist letters probably because they're thinking, at some point we might be able to do something, which they ended up reusing some of those properties in their, what was it called?
The Rare Replay package.
The Rare Replay, yeah.
Which is one of the most brilliant repackaging of old games I've ever seen. That was the sole reason that I bought an Xbox One back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, they did great things like with their mini game versions of Jetpack and Saber Wolf and stuff. Definitely cool. Definitely something to look at. But at the same time, I mean, for so long, these games were out of the public eye, and it is a little bit of a shame. I mean, things like Steam are making it easier because remember, Steam doesn't exist yet at this point. But once you have that online distribution, even if it's just pennies per transaction, but the fact that everything becomes infinitely and continuously available for purchase is where we want to be. We don't want any game to not be available, but at the same time, unless people can earn some kind of money off it, unless the license holder can earn some kind of money off of it, there will always be this tension between making it available and making it available legally.
Yep. Yep.
So, good on them for making it available, but obviously we don't quite have the solution that we want yet.
No. So, LEGO has the Force.
Play Magazine has an interesting one-page ad for LEGO's new Star Wars licensed sets. While the first sets hit shelves in 1999 to coincide with The Phantom Menace, it's interesting to see an ad like this in a gamer/anime magazine.
But I'm guessing the Traveler's Tales games, they haven't been released yet. That'll be 2000.
Those will be 05.
6, 5?
05.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. To coincide with Episode 3.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, the first game that they released, LEGO Star Wars, is the first 3 prequels. Or the 3 prequels.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So that won't come out until Episode 3 launches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember playing those with my oldest. So, Wii, I think.
Yeah. But it also shows how LEGO is trying to position itself now as an older brand. They're clearly going after the older audience in this magazine.
Yep.
And they're also focusing on not the prequel movies, because Episode 1 is already out at this point. They're going after the classic. So it's a picture of, Darth Vader fighting Luke with Palpatine in the background.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, speaking of LEGO, EA has LEGO.
Electronic Arts has signed a 3-year deal with LEGO to co-publish 30 games on at least 4 platforms.
So, are these any of the Traveler's Tales games then? Or
No. Those are actually going to come out through... Oh, there's a different publisher. I can't remember who now.
Okay.
No, these are going to be a whole bunch of forgettable games.
Okay.
Lego Stunt Island, I believe, is one of them. And a whole bunch of Bionicle games. Bionicle is the up-and-coming property that they're using. This idea of truly exploiting the Lego man look and feel for a whole bunch of different characters that is just now. Remember, Lego Star Wars was the first time Lego had licensed an outside property to adapt.
Yeah.
That, of course, is going to explode in the next few years,
yes.
Largely because of the Travel or Tales game. But yeah, the games that are going to come out of this are very, very bad. There's really no bright spot in this license. But it is interesting that EA is going to try it, then they're going to abandon it, and that's when it's Take-Two, I believe.
Sounds right.
That publishes Lego Star Wars, yeah.
Good.
And so, yeah. And, of course, Lego Star Wars, we just got, the Skywalker Saga, which is basically just a repackage of all the previous stuff with some bonuses. But, yeah, so it's a huge franchise today. But at this point, a whole bunch of people had tried doing Lego games, and they had all pretty much failed. Yeah. So that magic touch that Traveler Tales will bring to it is not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too bad for those guys, I guess, because that must be a cash cow.
Oh, it is. I mean, I still haven't played Lego Marvel 2. That's still on my to-do list.
Yeah. So, Bernie Stolar is back at BAM.
BAM Entertainment, known for their licensed games, has a new head honcho, Bernie Stolar, who had previously been at Sony and Sega and lately of Mattel fame.
So, BAM Entertainment. What do I know? What do I know that they released?
Probably nothing. Their primary thing at BAM was to do licenses. So they did like Powerpuff Girl games and other Nickelodeon properties.
Yeah.
They also did a few, more serious titles, but nothing really of any kind of real consequence.
Okay.
But they were set up basically for this purpose. They were a licensing game company. Okay, I think the most important thing they did was the GBA port of Wolfenstein 3D.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking at their catalog here.
Yeah.
The only title I really know is Wolfenstein 3D.
Yeah.
There's just lots and lots of Powerpuff Girls and Disney stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I think I played of this list was the X vs. Sever games. I played those for quite a bit. They were GBA first-person shooters based off of a movie with Antonio Banderas and what was her name? She was in Ally McBeal and in the Charlie's Angels movies. I'll think of her name later. Really hot actress at the time.
Okay.
And so, and the movie got massively delayed due to a whole bunch of different things that happened. So the game actually came out, the first game came out way before the movie. Then the movie was a complete bomb, but they made a second game anyway. So as far as, as far as first-person shooters on the GBA, some of the best first-person shooters on the GBA, other than, of course, the port of Doom. But still, it's a first-person shooter on the GBA.
Yeah.
Oh, and I see Wipeout Fusion. They were responsible for that. Not Wipeout's greatest moment.
So were you thinking of Lucy Liu?
Lucy Liu, thank you.
Yeah.
Lucy Liu. I had such a crush on her. But yeah. Now, Stolar, of course, if you don't remember, he was part of the original team that launched the Sony PlayStation in the U.S. Then he went to Sega, and he was the one who famously said that the Saturn was not Sega's future and was there for the launch of the Dreamcast, but he got canned right before the launch of the Dreamcast. I think he also got canned right before the launch of the PlayStation. And then he goes on to Mattel, and Mattel just imploded. We talked about that a few months ago. And BAM, he's only going to be at BAM for about a year. And his leaving will coincide with the BAM Entertainment being delisted from the NASDAQ's main listing and being moved to the NASDAQ small caps on a probationary period because their stock dipped below 16 cents a share.
So he seems like bad news, this guy.
Well, no. He's actually really, really good.
Okay.
It's just that he apparently he had this reputation of the guy who could, do the impossible, and he was just brought into terrible situations and wasn't really given the opportunity to save it. I mean, he's always blamed for, oh, you killed the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn was already dead when he said the comment that this is not our future. He just accelerated a bad situation.
Okay.
And so on and so forth. So Stoller, a very rough and tumble type of guy from the interviews I've seen. Yeah, I did send out a request asking for an interview, but I think the guy's in his 80s at this point. And I know he's given some interviews, but he did not respond to me.
Okay.
I'd love to talk to him. He's got a long history even before Sony, but
yeah, it sounds like he'd have some good story to tell.
Oh, definitely. Oh, well, talking about
the next one, I'm going to try to pronounce this. Is just Jez San? Gets an OBE?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah?
So Jez San, founder of Argonaut Software, has become the first game-related person to earn the rank of Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. AKA
I want to be that as well.
You want that as well?
Yes.
I think you have to be an English citizen to get that. You're not qualified. Sorry. Your duties as podcaster at the Retro Asylum are not going to be sufficient.
Should be enough. Do you think it's a protected title, or can I just call myself that?
I'm guessing that it's probably a protected title. It's kind of like, trying to sell feta cheese that wasn't made in Greece. Yeah. Some English listeners are very insulted that I made that comparison. Okay. While he doesn't get the Sir title, he is still pretty darn far up there. So, yes. Argonaut Software, famous for a bunch of early 3D games on microcomputers and, of course, for Star Fox.
Yes.
And the Super Effects chip.
But speaking of Argonaut purchases Particle System.
3D games pioneers Argonaut have purchased fellow UK developer Particle Systems. Particle Systems has previously developed Subwar 2050 and the Independence War series of games and is working on EXO at the time of the purchase.
I never played. Maybe I played Independence War, actually.
Yeah, Independence War was a space flight sim.
Yeah.
And Subwar 2050 was basically a shooter, sci-fi game.
Yeah.
But this is an interesting story because it's coming in a weird time, because Argonaut has a lot of money. They've just gone public, so they gathered money from that, and they went public off of the back of having been the studio that created the first Harry Potter titles for EA.
Okay.
So remember, the first Harry Potter movie's out at this point, and EA has been putting out the licensed games.
Yeah.
But Argonaut is only going to work on the first series of games, the Sorcerer's Stone game.
Okay.
And they're doing their own big game, Malice, which was this game about this girl. She's got this giant hammer. And the first tech demos for Malice were shown as Xbox tech demos to show off the technology in early shows of the Xbox, like a year or two before the system came out.
Yeah.
And since then, Malice has gone from an Xbox exclusive to also being on the PS2. They're developing this, and unfortunately, the game is going to suck.
Okay.
And so, and EXO, which is this space marine combat game, is never going to come out.
Okay.
And publisher Infogrames, who is going to publish EXO, has given up on it at this point. So they're buying Particle Systems with this game that Infogrames has already said, no, not dealing with it. And they're going to put more money into it, and it's not going to go anywhere. So Argonaut, he just got an OBE. They've got a bunch of money. There's not a lot of future.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately. Because Argonaut is a pioneer.
There'll be a death of a company here soon for Peter.
It's gonna peter on for a little while. I think it's another 2 years or something.
Okay.
But it's not. There's no great future for this one, unfortunately.
Okay. So, game devs look to MovieBiz for funding model.
Oh, yes. Now, this one I had to do a bit of a deep dive on. So, at the Milia 2002 conference in Cannes, one of the panels discussed the various options developers have for financing ever-increasing game budgets. One option presented is completion bonding, a model that originated with movie development back in the 1950s, whereby a bank lends the money for the game's development, and if it is delivered on time, then the publisher pays off the loan. This model looks like a promising way to approach development, and many prominent games would get developed using this method, including Hitman and Arkham Asylum.
So you have to explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. You lend some money of the bank, and only if you actually deliver it on time. So the developer lends some money, and the publisher pays off the loan if it's delivered on time. If it's not delivered on time, the developer has to pay it off themselves.
Yeah, it doesn't lend. Lend is the person who gives them. So the developer borrows them.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
no problem. So the developer borrows the money, and in the contract it says we have to pay the money back if we don't deliver it on time.
Okay, like that.
But if we do deliver it on time, the obligation for paying back the loan switches to the publisher.
Okay. So I guess that would give them some incentive to actually do stuff on time.
Exactly. It gives them the incentive, and it takes some of the pressure off the publisher, because if the product is late or something, then they're not out the money plus all the hassle of rescheduling and all this stuff.
True.
Yeah. And so this is a business model. I'd never heard of this before, and I kind of ended up doing a little bit of a deep dive. I lost like a day's worth of research for this episode on this, but it was a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've never heard about that either. So the final piece of news for today is that Gundam drones hit Japan.
Japanese otaku can now shell out over $600 for a Gundam drone. The remote-controlled robots have a built-in head camera that transmits live video to the remote control and has a gun that fires actual BBs.
So BBs are small rubber
little
bullets.
Plastic pellets.
Yeah. Sounds like a dangerous toy.
It sounds like a dangerous toy. Looking at these things, and I found one on eBay.
Yeah.
And it's kind of insane that, it's got an actual display on the remote control. It basically looks like your Steam Deck, with the little camera in the middle and controls on the sides.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of insane that this stuff exists. So I thought, to end the show on a lighter note, this is where we could have gone. We could have had, Gundams fighting each other, and they could have turned this into a proper game system. Unfortunately, they did not. But
so I'm just looking at pictures on eBay as well from the link you sent. That thing surely can't fly. It can just drive around on its feet, right?
Yeah, but it can actually walk.
Okay.
It can walk.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. Yeah. So cool.
Yeah, indeed.
Killer robots.
And thus we get to the end of the news for today.
Yes, which of course means that we have one final obligation for the co-host. What is the word of the episode?
So it has to be OBE, because I want myself one of those.
You want an OBE. Okay,
yes.
You just have to become an English citizen. I'm sure that one of your Retro Asylum podcast colleagues will be able to organize that for you.
Yes.
All you need to do is marry one of them, and there you go.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, everybody, remember, you can catch us on all the socials. You can become a patron and help support the show. I don't keep any of the money for myself, really. It goes just to paying the fees for hosting this and supporting some other shows. And maybe at some point I'll finally be able to buy some additional equipment to make this not sound terrible. Who knows? One of those things will happen. And Mads, where can people find you?
So these days, you can mostly find me at a little podcast called the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine. But sometimes I occasionally podcast at the Retro Asylum as well, doing retro stuff, and at Playthrough Podcast, where we are currently playing through Horizon Zero Dawn. We've been playing through that for forever because it's a long game, but having fun doing that.
Have you guys already decided what the game will be after this? Like one that you can get through in like an hour?
It's not one you can get through in an hour, but it's a lot better. It's a Telltale game. It's The Wolf Among Us.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you read the books?
I've read the first. I've got the first two collections. You know, those big hardcover versions that they released. I've got the first two of those, and okay. I think that covers more than the story of these games. So
yeah, no, you really only need the first to get through it. Yeah, unfortunately, the series takes a nosedive at a certain point.
Okay.
I think I stopped like after book 8.
Yeah,
and that's when it was like, no, this is terrible. But up until then, it's
really good. I think I actually bought those two first books while I was in Seattle, which we talked about the last time we recorded. Yeah,
cool. Well, let's see. There you go. Perfect thing to do when you're in Seattle. I miss. Sorry, there at least used to be some really good used bookstores in Seattle that I used to spend so much time perusing back then.
Yeah,
that's where I bought a whole bunch of stuff. So that was like my teenage Saturday afternoons was hitting the used bookstores. They'd also have sections for software and stuff like that. So
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, good times. But okay, so everybody, links to those shows in the show notes as well. So please go and check it all out. Hope you guys had fun. Come back next time when we'll be going back 40 years to April of 1982. And until then, have fun.
Bye.